In the city of St. Paul, nearly a third of all calls for service are related to domestic violence. When someone calls 911, the response will involve professionals working in 5 levels of government and over a dozen intervening agencies. When we coordinate our work, when we give each other what we need when we need it, when we're able to figure out what's actually going on and then match our response to that, lives are saved. Often, violence is greatly reduced and sometimes stopped. St. Paul took on the ambitious effort of writing a blueprint for safety to govern every significant action taken in these cases. We began by acknowledging that we knew a lot about the families in our city, but we failed to bring that information together.
We knew we had to make a change. We knew that we were missing something as far as really addressing domestic violence. And to do that, sometimes you have to look at your shortcomings. We had some, plain and simple.
The St. Paul Police Department was not drawn into the collaboration. They were instrumental in creating the collaboration. It was them saying, we're opening up our files, we're opening up our offices, we're opening up our doors. Come in, all of you, and look how we do this and see how we can do better. And the city attorney followed suit and all the other arms of the system within St. Paul Ramsey County. But if it wasn't for the St. Paul Police, it would not have happened.
We make more decisions before noon every day than most people make in 2 or 3 months. That's the nature of our job. And a lot of those decisions, we feel we don't have adequate information. The more information we can get, the better the quality of our decisions. And the biggest effect of the blueprint for us has been better information.
So what's particularly helpful for us is to look at the bigger picture and see what is the level of violence going on here and what's the appropriate response that we as prosecutors or the criminal justice system need to take in response to this level of violence. There may be many factors involved, and not everybody is the stalker, soon-to-be killer. We have a lot of other factors that are involved in assessing risk and the level of violence that's involved with a victim.
And the way I make that determination as to whether it's a long pattern of violence and intimidation or an isolated incident is through the police reports. It's the detail that's provided by those on-scene officers and then by the investigators in the follow-up that really give me a clue to know whether I should go at this case as a stalking case, a higher level case, or if I should treat it in a different manner. I depend so much on what's written in those reports.
Patrol officers have a really unique role in that they're typically the very first practitioner, the very first people to show up on a scene and see firsthand what the environment looks like after a domestic has occurred. And if a patrol officer police report is written in such a way that captures what the environment is, it provides a window for me to see what kind of safety planning specifically I may need to have with the victim.
Each domestic abuse incident is important to document, even if it doesn't result in a conviction, because most cases will come back to us. It's the accumulation of detail that helps us to eventually stop the violence.
So if the blueprint has done anything for the system, it's really to bring together all these elements. And in so doing, it's brought together a separate police reports sometimes that have really helped us to look at the domestic violence not as a single event or as a series of single events, but rather as this whole relationship between two people.
The Blueprint approach created a standard of practice for all criminal justice practitioners. An interagency team spent nearly a year observing all aspects of the system, from the 911 operator through the probation officer. As a team, they set standards of practice for each other. The assumption was if every player did their work following an agreed-upon standard of practice, then they would collectively be in the strongest position to intervene in domestic violence cases. The one time the victim will reveal to you what's going on in the family is that night. Patrol officers are the key to finding out the context, and they do that by asking 3 open-ended risk questions. Do you think he would seriously injure you or the kids? Describe a time when you were the most hurt by him or afraid of him. Describe to me what kind of violence he uses, and is the violence getting better or worse?
What the officer is asking for is not just what happened today, what happened in the last 5 minutes or leading up to this phone call, but really an historical context to the relationship and sometimes a long-standing pattern of abuse or threats and intimidation. This is really important because although the crime the officer may be there investigating on that night where the report is being made, maybe only rise to the level of a misdemeanor, but often they will find out about much more serious offenses that happened a month, a year, 10 years ago that have been ongoing. Often with victims, the most serious offenses are the ones that aren't reported because whether the victim is afraid it's going to, cause the husband to get locked up for a long time, or maybe the injury was so serious that they were way too afraid to ever report it. This question is designed to elicit information, again, of this historical context of the relationship and of the history that's going on so that it puts the current incident, no matter how big or small, in the proper context and framework of this abusive relationship.
Every single practitioner who acts on these cases is influenced by the context of the incident found in the answers to these risk questions.
The risk questions are really important for me to assess a case. When I look at a police report and I see sometimes facts that are messy or inconclusive, I'm sometimes on the fence about whether I want to charge that case or not. And when I read the risk questions where she says that she's fearful of his behavior, that she thinks he's going to harm her, and here's why specifically, that the harm is getting worse, here's how it started, and it just keeps escalating. These are things that really weigh very heavily in charging this case, because it's taken it from a case that I'm kind of on the fence to one where I'm really seeing how at risk this victim really is for future harm. And so if we can get a charge out on this person, we might be able to stop this violence quicker rather than later on.
And in order to really understand what is going on when a victim of domestic violence calls the police for help, is to find out what the history has been. These risk questions allow that to happen. You not only get a history of abuse, but you can also pinpoint stalking. You can also look at threats and coercion and intimidation that may not ever be identified if those questions aren't asked.
Having the 3 risk questions has changed our job dramatically. Before the blueprint, we never even got the police reports. We were just completing bail evaluations on our risk assessment tool off of a charge. So we had no information about the incident or the 3 risk questions. So now we're taking that into account, and we feel that we're better able to make recommendations to the courts and also supervision.
You start reading the reports, it leaps out at you the way the officers are writing the reports. They will talk about, when did you feel most frightened? The particular incident the person was arrested for may not be as severe as the history of violence. Frequently it isn't. But they will talk about, when were you most frightened? And they tell about experiences where a knife was held to them, or a gun was held to them, or their children were threatened. I'm finding out how scared these women are and why, specifics on why. I'm finding out this isn't just an isolated incident, or sometimes it is an isolated incident. And that makes a difference, and it should make a difference in my decision making.
Gone on arrival cases. Before the blueprint, if officers were called to a domestic and the suspect was already gone, that call went to the bottom of the priority list. But research shows that 2/3 of the assaults that were GOA resulted in a new assault in 30 days. We now have reprioritized them to the top instead of at the bottom.
The people who abuse and then flee before you arrived aren't the least bad of the bunch. If you think about it, it actually makes sense. They actually know what they're doing, and they're being abusive and then leaving before you get there. Ask yourself, why are they doing that? Because they know how the system works, and they want to keep intimidating and abusing the people that they're in relationships with. Although we don't have the chance at the moment, if you get to a call where someone is gone or the suspect has left prior to your arrival, treat that police report as your chance to make sure that you can still catch them. That police report is a huge net to catch that person. They may have run out of your hand grip at that very moment that you were sent to the call, but the GOA cases are as important, if not more important, than the ones where the suspect is there and you actually put the handcuffs on them and take them to jail.
On gone on arrival cases, I need to somehow have evidence that, in fact, the suspect was on scene before I can charge the case, and also that a crime occurred, not just that he was on scene or she was on scene. Sometimes it's a neighbor who saw the suspect there. Sometimes it's a child. Maybe it's a 3-year-old child. So sometimes even the little ones can provide evidence sufficient to get me to charge something. Sometimes there's no indication in the reports that I'm going to be able to prove that he was there or she was there, and I order up the 911 tape, and lo and behold, I hear a male voice in the background screaming at the female who's making the 911 call.
Before we started this collaboration with the police, it would take upwards of sometimes 80 or more days to have a case charged on a gone on arrival situation. We were able to reduce that down to under 8 days, which was an amazing thing that we were able to do, and that just made victims all the safer if we were able to get a warrant out for the suspect within almost a week period of time.
The one thing the Blueprint has done is broken down barriers. It's brought people together throughout the criminal justice system to sit at the table, and when we do have some issues, we're able to discuss them and go forward. I've been so impressed because I've been part of some of these meetings myself where I've sat there. We've talked about how do we share information better. If there's one case that slips through the cracks, do we have another way to take a re-look at that case, because it's so important, especially when we're talking about domestics. Because one case that slips through the crack can affect a woman, a family. It can have very lethal effects if we don't do our job right. The Blueprint has allowed all of us to work together in a much more cohesive manner.
We've always been pretty proud of the level of quality of the police reports in domestic cases, but now we're seeing so consistently across the board photographs being taken and more detailed victim statements being given. And what it's done, it's really improved our work as prosecutors, and it's made us feel almost accountable to the good quality of work that the police have started. So that when we get a police report that has such attention to detail and has all these things that we've asked for, it makes us want to do a better job too. And I think it's really helped us to improve the quality of work that we do as prosecutors.
And I can tell you that the difference in the police reports, I really would like to say thank you, St. Paul police officers, for responding to the Blueprint, because you have helped us.